Welcome back to the Chasing Common Ground podcast. I have a brand new to the show guest, Dr. Ashley Dwyer. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you.
So, one of the things that I like to do, and I will highlight the fact that I have a very dedicated audience in the sense that there are maybe a handful of people that listen to every single episode of the show. And so, with that said, they might not know who you are. So, give us sort of like the most interesting intro that you have to explain how you got to where we're at today.
Man, the most interesting intro. Okay, well, let's see if I can do it in like 30 seconds. I am a pharmacist by trade, so I'm a licensed pharmacist, graduated with my pharmacy degree in 2014, found my love of like health and fitness and nutrition as an NPC bodybuilding bikini chick when I was 22. So started doing shows at 22, graduated pharmacy school at 25. I don't recommend doing graduate school while competing. You will not have enough carbs for your brain. I don't recommend it. But went through a slew of health issues after competing and an eating disorder, hormonal issues. Apparently you can't overtrain, undereat, and stress yourself out. Your hormones don't love it, right? So through years of trying to rebuild my own health through Western medicine, I realized it was more of the lifestyle change and holistic approach that I needed. So it kind of got me really into preventative care. And as a pharmacist, and a retail pharmacist at that, so you'd find me at like Walgreens, your grocery store, things like that. It was really morally like debilitating, right? Like I wanted to help so much more than just handing out pills. So in 2018, I created my company and we first started on a different pivot. And now we've kind of shifted into helping women, busy professionals, especially that live in, work in high stress environments. Hey, healthcare workers. And helping them optimize their hormone health, transforming their lifestyles, and just improving their overall quality of life. And if we can reverse some disease states, I'm here for it. So that's what I currently do now. So I don't know if that was interesting or not, but
It was interesting. So, I want to kind of dig a little bit into your experience training for physique and some of the lessons that you learned from that. Maybe some of the things that you changed your mind on, where you may have thought of things a certain way before you went into it and then changed your mind after you experienced it. And let's go through the lens of the topics of how we perceive ourselves and what we deem to be like the best version of ourselves, if that makes sense.
yeah, I mean, I was 22 at the time, so I was so young and probably competed for 4 years. But before that, I had no real idea what like health was, right? I was eating Fiber One bars. I was drinking like a fish in college, late night pizza, would skip meals and do fasted cardio to burn it off. I grew up an athlete, so I figured that would like hold me over. It didn't. And then we got into bodybuilding and I just kind of was like, I'll never be that person who has abs. Meanwhile, I'm like a size 4, like by no means, I don't know if you know what that means, but women will know. By no means is that like, I was still a tiny human, but I wanted to be muscular and was doing all the wrong things to get there. I was like doing way too much cardio, wasn't eating any protein, whatever, probably not at all, caring about anything. And then I got into competing for bodybuilding and learned some of the most extreme obsessive behaviors. There's a reason why women look the way they do on stage for these shows and why they don't look that way year round. It's because it's not sustainable. Like no days off from the gym, fasted cardio and lifting, eating as little as possible. I wanted to be as little as possible, and I was. I ended up going from like a 4 to a 00 competition day, like 134 pounds to 108. I don't know if you can imagine that, but it was a tiny, tiny human. And then you kind of like, it messes more with your mental state. Like you now want the 8 pack and you now want to stay so tiny that you're afraid to eat more. So you just continue eating a little bit. You become afraid of food. You overfixate on everything. Hence the orthorexia nervosa, like eating disorder of just like overfixation on everything, food and exercise. Everything gets demonized. Carbs, fruit before bed. Oh my God. If I had like a banana before bed, I thought I would wake up like 10 pounds heavier. It's ridiculous. It's not healthy. Like this is disordered eating. So it took me a while to get out of that mindset. And now I kind of talk about it all the time that like your smallest self is not your healthiest self. Like now I just want to be strong. I want optimal hormones. Like I'm in my mid 30s. I just want to live a balanced lifestyle and eat enough and fuel my body enough and just build muscle mass. And like, I don't care to be the smallest version of myself. Like now it's more about taking up space and being healthy on the inside. And I think that was the massive thing that changed over the years is like, oh, you actually need rest days. Oh, you actually need to eat more food. You don't need to like confuse your muscles and, you know, whatever it was, I was doing it. Fat burners, like everything, everything.
I think
So bad.
it's important to experience that stuff. Like I know for myself, I have a background where I was a spin instructor for a period of time. I've done all the different group fitness. And I've experienced a lot of different versions of myself. And I found that another one of the differentiators was like before I was doing things in the sense that if I looked a certain way that like people would like me. And now it's more about sense of purpose. It's like if I'm able to carry out this volume of different things, identities in my life, like being able to be a good uncle, being able to be a good brother, a good son, and that relies on me having to be healthy, strong, confident, self-aware, all those other things, which make it more of like a holistic balance than thinking like, oh, I have to just look as lean and jacked as possible at all costs. I myself have had periods of time where most of my lunches were like a can of tuna and some spinach. And that was not sufficient. I was like falling asleep in the middle of the day, but I was achieving my outcomes. But what I learned was that like even when I achieved those outcomes, the people who gravitated towards me didn't actually like me for me, and I wasn't any further ahead. So I'm curious, as you've moved into this season of your life, like what is the driver for you? Like what is like when you just have a shitty week, a shitty day, and you're like, why do I do all this? Like why do I commit to all this? Like what is kind of like your North Star that drives you forward?
Are you watching me this week? Because that's one of those weeks. Are you are you like in my apartment this week? Um, it's, I mean, business ownership can get very overwhelming. And so just having so much on your plate and so many people who need you and just almost feeling like touched out with notifications and social media and like just constant weird dopamine hits. Yeah, it's a lot. In the past, I feel like I would very much cope with either food or alcohol and like numb it or just try and escape through it all. Now I really take, like I set hard boundaries. Boundaries is something like I had to really learn and implement with friendships, with relationships, with my time, with everything. So I cut work off at like a hard stop at night. So I have time to like unwind. Journaling. Journaling is so, I had this out this morning. So just kind of like taking time to do breath work and breathe and recenter so that I'm not so reactionary during the day. Like that's been a huge thing. And it doesn't always work. I'm going to be honest. This is not a perfect thing. Sometimes we just grind until the stuff you have to do is off your plate and then you feel a little better. But I think by like if I'm not prioritizing myself, kind of like you said, like I want to be a good uncle, I want to be like a good friend, all these things. You can't be those things if you're not taking care of yourself first. And that doesn't include like just your physical health. It's more mental and what you're doing to recharge. So kind of just trying to figure out what recharges me and doing more of those things. It's been like it's still a process, still a learning, work in progress for sure.
Like it's a constant journey. One of the things, and you alluded to the fact, like, are you watching me? And it's like, well, I do. I keep tabs on like what you're up to because like you're kind of leading by example in a way that I'm like, yeah, I can resonate with that. Where I'll give one of the examples that stands out to me. You have created time for your friends, which I
Mhm.
think a lot of us are scared to do. Like we think, oh, I'm gonna fall behind if I make time for my friends. But truthfully, it can help us stay on track in a multitude of ways, and oftentimes it expedites our process or progress. So I am curious as to like going forward, what are some of your like non-career goals that you have for yourself? Maybe like within the span of like the next 10 years, where it's not so much like an urgent rush, but it's just like things that you're working towards in life, things that you're trying to line up so that they happen.
Man, non-career? That should give you an answer right there. Um, there's definitely a part of me, obviously, that wants to, I don't even want to say like settle down. Spoken, I don't know if you're into like zodiac stuff, but as a true Sagittarius, what is settling down? Uh, so obviously like get married. I'm kind of, this is going to be like a shocker for some people, but I am iffy on starting my own family. I don't know that I want that anymore. I always grew up and thought I wanted children, and now I'm like, could take it or leave it. If it happens, cool. If it doesn't, I'll be 36 this year. So I'm not freezing my eggs. I'm not doing any of that. So if I meet someone and we want it, cool, I can have them. But so I don't even want to say like settling down and having a family. It's more just like constantly improving and just exposing, like some people may not know either. I have a lot of anxiety, and especially health anxiety and a fear of doing some things. So getting over those, traveling a ton more, seeing the world a lot more, I think would be number one on my 10-year plan. Not even like a relationship, just like traveling and seeing more things, experiencing more cultures. Like that kind of really lights me up. Um, Making more friends, potentially moving to another city. Like I moved from Florida to Austin last year and it was the best decision ever. So I'm like, where maybe that could happen somewhere else too. Um, Gosh, I don't even know. I'm thinking in like the realm of 3 to 5 years. I can't even imagine 10 years at this point. But so maybe a husband and children, maybe just a husband and traveling.
Mhm.
Really just what I have, so simple right now, what I want to
Well,
do.
I think it's important to have that be like top of mind for us in this industry, because a lot of us are kind of like reluctant to plan for stuff like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, having that in our mind can help shape a lot of our decisions within our business. So, like, I am often, for me, and this is going to be like me cracking open the shell of like behind the scenes of Chris, but basically, when I'm thinking about training jujitsu or strength training or anything like that, I'll often be like, oh man, like I'm just gonna get like the shit beat out of me. Like, why am I going to this? Or I'm like, it feels like I'm just doing this thing over and over with no means to an end. But for myself, I envision future me in the next 10 years. Like I would probably settle down. I could see myself having a family, and I want to be capable of leading by example in a physical sense, in a mental sense. And so what that instills in me is I'm like, okay, like I have to establish all these habits now. I have to be that person before I get into that stage of my life. And then it not only like it expands beyond just like the physical health and the nutritional health, because then I realize I'm like reflecting on all the times in my life that I've gone on like cool trips, whether it be
Mhm.
backpacking in Costa Rica or spontaneously seeing family in Denmark. I'm like, that is so cool to just have like the courage to go on those trips. So I have to embody that part of me now. And then that I all of a sudden I realized like these financial constraints. I'm like, okay, in order to make that happen, I have to reach this goal professionally. But it's
Mhm.
no longer like me versus somebody else. I have to make this 20K a month or I have to make this 50K a month. It's more so like I have to do this because it ties to something more meaningful with like more purpose. And it gives me a reason to like figure out the way to make it happen, whether it's like structuring more online work than in-person work or raising prices for certain
Yeah.
services. One thing that I wanted to spotlight in this, because both of us attended the Real Coaches Summit this past year. First, are you planning to go back?
Yes.
Good.
I've gone
So
every year so far, so we'll go and see a ROM and support it all again. It's been great.
exactly. And I mean, I want to take as many opportunities as I can to encourage other people to go because A, I think what Aram is doing is fantastic. And B, I think that it takes a village to promote things like conferences and stuff because so many people are reluctant to go. Many people are like, well, I need to do this instead. And it's like, do you really, or do you need to see your friends and hang out and have like random conversations and share meals with people and share funny stories and make new memories? So
Yeah.
if you were going to convince somebody who is on the fence about going to any kind of in-person conference, what would be the points you'd make to them to kind of like shift their mindset to make them realize just what a once in a lifetime experience it can be?
Oh my gosh. I mean, okay, coming from someone who went to probably 5 conferences last year to now only really going to 1 this year because of just moving and other things going on in life. I will say I severely miss it this year. Like, we work from home, right? We work from our computers. We can work from anywhere, but we end up staying either home or like in a coffee shop. Like, it is so fun when you get to meet your online internet friends because we're all friends in the coaching space, right? Online, but we never get to meet in person. So forget even like the speaker topics are great no matter where you go. I'm sure you're going to be learning a wealth of knowledge, but the real part about going to these things is to connect with new people, make new friends. It's not even networking. It's like relationship building. Like, I met you in March in Iran, right? And like now we're here on a podcast. It's crazy that this kind of stuff even works out. And like, I've loved following everyone's journey that we meet. It's really the in-person connections and how the fitness industry, especially health and fitness, is such a big industry, but it's really small. It's actually very small. Everybody kind of knows everyone. There's that 6 degrees of freedom. So I really think it's the networking opportunities. Like, even the speakers that will be at a ROMS thing, I will sit in there, I will take notes, we will watch them. But the real magic is like at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the in-betweens, the afters. I think that's what makes it so much fun. And it's a write-off. You get to go have fun in a different place while working and learning.
Hmm.
Come on.
I mean, like all those points are solid, and like what has impacted me the most is I'll give an example of like one of the first like international summits that I went to. It was in Kansas City in 2019. And at first, like my impression was I was going to go and I was going to see these seminars, and all of a sudden, after I saw the seminar, I was going to be like doing much better in my career because I basically it was everything that I could do to just get across the border while still having enough money in my bank account to buy a couple cheeseburgers. Like I was
Mhm.
running very lean at that point in my career. And what happened was like the connections that I made during that time helped me on like an emotional and mental health level during like the pandemic.
Oh, that's
When things were like shut down and I just needed like a friend to talk to, I made those connections in 2019 at the conference. And then that kind of enlightened me to like the value of making like really strong connections, like not so much like collaborations and partnerships, but more so like real life connections. And since then, there's been lots of times where I've been like sharing a Uber with somebody, or maybe when people come up to the Edmonton conference, I'll drive them from the airport or drive them to the airport. And we have like these real conversations. Like if somebody's going through something personally, or somebody's been doubting themselves and they haven't shared about it, or somebody's just they've had a struggle that they've never been able to talk to anybody about, but then finally they have that one-on-one time. And it's these are the things that I really want to amplify conferences for, because sometimes I'll see somebody go to a conference for the first time and they're diligently watching all of the presentations. They're taking notes. They're like, okay, when is it going to happen? When is the magic going to happen? I'm like, just stand next to somebody and start talking to them eventually. Say they have nice
Mhm.
shoes. Introduce yourself and just kind of like see what happens. And it's not to say that every connection that you make is going to be the best connection, but if you don't make any connections, you'll miss out on the opportunities to like have people that like truly genuinely have your back. because like we talk about how the industry is small, but with that, we can probably both identify people in our circles who like if we went through something really tough personally, we could probably name one or two people who would fly to our city and hang out with us for a week to help us get it through it. Like there are people in my world who, if they were going through stuff, I would go to that length because like we are building this like strong connection with these people in our circles. And that's where I think the biggest value lies. But I'm going to throw you a curveball and totally change kind of like the topic in a way. You talked about
Okay.
journaling. So I don't need you to share your journal or anything, but I want you to see if you can reflect on a time that after you journaled something, like wrote it out, you had like an aha moment. Because I know I've gone through some times. My example is a lot of times I'll kind of like review like text messages with people or comments that people make on a post or things that they say. And I'll all of a sudden I see what a positive light that they see me in. I'm like, oh, you actually think I'm awesome or good or helpful or positive, and I might not have latched onto that the first time. So I'm
Mhm.
curious if you've gone through any processes similar to that where you got more clear on something or felt better about something after writing it out in your journal.
Yeah. So I have two, and I let me preface this by saying I used to hate journaling. I am someone whose handwriting, former pharmacist, okay, doctor handwriting is a real thing, even though I'm a lowercase doctor. My handwriting is terrible. It is chicken scratch. Like my brain moves way faster than my hand. So we can't read. I hate journaling for that reason. So I have two examples because this kind of helped in like a relationship standpoint, a non-work standpoint, and a work standpoint. So I like to do brain dumping instead of journaling. Like whatever is going on inside my brain, I need to put it down on paper. So instead of being like, dear diary, or like writing out prompts because I hate writing, I will just put down my thoughts as like sentences, just like this and this is how I'm feeling. And for my business, it helped me get really clear on the avatar and the ideal client I wanted to work with. Because I found myself, starting with the more hormones and preventative health, but then somehow shifted into messaging for just general weight loss and health. And I was like, no, I'm not general. I don't like this. I want to go back to there. So it was more like jotting down and journaling down like who our successful clients were, how we were helping them, why they came to work with us, the issues they had, and just putting it all on paper and reading it back. I was like, this is way more clear now. Like this is just maybe it's brain mapping and not journaling for work, but that was super helpful. And in a non work standpoint, see, Chris, I'm a little woo woo. I don't know if you get that from my Instagram, but I am a little woo woo. And so I remember being with an ex boyfriend, and there's this thing on August 8th called like the Lions Portal. I don't know. It's a manifestation thing. So you're supposed to write a letter to your future self. And so, like, of what you want and how things are going in the present tense a year from now. So I wrote this letter to myself as like, this is what's going to happen in a year. Like, we're going to be engaged, all this stuff, like back a couple years ago. And then I read it probably 6 months later. And the things that I wanted and the issues that I was having with him were not changing. They were getting worse. And it was like my immediate, like, I need to end this. So, had I not read that back, I wouldn't have seen that nothing was changing, nothing was getting better. The life was not on the path that I wanted. So, I think it's a good tool to get everything out of your head and put it on paper. And it's a really good tool to see how things are progressing. Like if you don't track something, you don't know how it's progressing. And so for me, it was just like really valuable to read back like what past Ashley wanted and being nowhere near it.
Mhm.
And so that is why I like journaling now because I like going back on things and being like, where are we in relation to that?
I think that's awesome. And like your journaling style would be very similar to mine. Mine is even more disorganized. What I have done, because this might actually help some people who don't do the traditional journaling, but sometimes I will use like a voice memo. to myself, and then I'll transcribe it, and I'll actually get like ChatGPT to give me like point form of like what I summarized.
That's
Um,
awesome.
I'll use ChatGPT to help me reflect on some of my thoughts, and I'll get it to run things through a filter of like maybe motivational interviewing, or perhaps asking me more questions to help me understand like where my obstacles may be. Like maybe I'm saying I'm struggling with this. I'm not like maybe I'm not meeting enough people, or I'm not making enough strong connections. And then the question that may be posed upon me would be like, when is the last time that you have done something different than what you've previously done? Like, when's the last time you went to like this social event? Or when's the last time that you talked to somebody new? And it kind of helps me to see kind of like the holes that I didn't know exist. And yeah, it's a super helpful exercise to just kind of like dump things out and understand things. And then the second piece you talked about, like letter to future self.
Hmm.
That's actually like I did two contracts with Lululemon during the pandemic, and during their training process, quite often that comes up where they'll run everybody through an exercise that like by the end of like if they're on like a 6 month seasonal contract, by the end this is how you perceive your future self to be. Or sometimes they'll run it like there's a few where it was like I did like a month of training before the role began. And they're like, by the time this role is done or this training is done, you're going to read your letter to the future self. And because it was so like personal, like nobody else would see the letter, it would just be me. I'd always expand it beyond Lululemon because I'm like, well, I'm doing this while gyms are closed and while I'm still managing online clients
Yeah.
and still doing what I can do. So I'm going to broaden this to expand on my career beyond this Lululemon contract. And I had similar enlightening moments where I'd get to that point in time. And for me, it was like the past me set a bar that I already exceeded. I see how much more opportunity there is in life. I see how much more hope there is in life. Um, and now I'm ready to write a new letter and set the bar even higher. Whereas if we don't have that like frame of reference, we can get kind of complacent with where we're at. We can be like,
Yep.
it's not going to work because I've tried everything. And it's like, have you really? Have you really tried everything?
Yep.
So with that said, to kind of like put the microphone back to you, when is the last time you found yourself in a state where you felt that sense of complacency, where you realized it was like, I thought I was doing everything, but I was not. And then you made kind of a change to level up beyond that.
Honestly, that's a great question because I don't know. I almost avoid complacency big time. Like I'm always working on something or working towards something or changing it up. But I think one of the biggest examples that pops into my head was my move to Austin. So I'm originally from South Florida, and I realized like the life that I was living there was not doing me any favors. I was very isolated. Like I love my family and friends who are there, but my lifestyle was just very, very different. And it wasn't like I needed a change. I needed a huge change. And so I did. And I was like, I'm going to move. You know, I had a friend here who convinced me to move, who I met at a conference and doing her certification. So that's again for the conference people, you might meet someone who brings you to a new city one day. She's one of my best friends now. And I was like, I'll just do a year. I'll see how it goes. I'll do a year. And then now I'm on my second year. So I mean, a move was big and not everyone needs to like move halfway across their country, right? But for me, it was just my location. Like I needed to get out of and change my environment big time.
Hmm. I think that is such a power move because like I understand 100% where you're coming from with that, like not disliking the area where you were at, but just kind of feeling like some staleness to like what was
Mhm.
going on. And it's great to see that you're still able to go back and visit family and friends from home and stuff like that. So the next question would be, what is something that you've been thinking about doing in the next like 12 months that you were reluctant to do that has a similar significance to like that move? It doesn't have to be as like daunting and big, crazy, life altering thing, but just kind of something that's just like just out of reach that you might work towards, but you've been a bit hesitant about.
I have a couple. I want to public speak. So I want to be on these stages at conferences. So that's a goal. I used to be terrified of public speaking, and now I think all the social media interaction is like whatever, but then get me on stage and I'll freeze. Watch. I want to do that. So I want to do that a lot more. And then a lot of people don't know this, but I was working on putting out my own certification and I paused it uh, because of time constraints and my business needing me more. And so I'm still teetering on whether I want to do it or not, and if it's a great idea. But maybe that will come back around in the next 12 months. We'll see.
I like that. That
Hmm.
makes me think of a book, and I'm actually going to awkwardly take time to figure out what this book was called because I it was suggested at the Evolve conference up here in Edmonton, and it brought me a lot of clarity. So the book is called Who Not How by
Hmm.
Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin. Every time I click on it, it plays, but it's Who Not How. Um,
I think I've heard of
wh-
this.
it's probably one of those ones that a lot of the people that we both listen to recommend quite often.
Yeah.
But the clarity that it gave me is sometimes like we come up with these goals and we're like more than capable of having them happen, but we're kind of like missing somebody who specializes in closing that gap. So an example being like a lot of my closest friends in the industry also have like the same like speaking goals.
Hmm.
And something that we have leaned into is just being like, well, who do we know that actually just books speakers, like beyond the fitness industry, just in a general sense? And can we find that person, like a person who specializes in booking speakers? And that example was easy to come up with because the presenter at the conference was talking about how one year they wanted to be on 300 podcasts in the year.
Wow.
That's a lot of podcasts.
That's
And that
almost every
means,
day. No
well,
way.
it would be every day, but chances are with like their lifestyle and stuff, they'd probably be batch recording and doing like 5 or 6 guest appearances on
Yeah.
certain days.
Yeah.
But that's what they wanted to do. And in order to reach that goal, rather than them relying on just the networking skills that they had, they found somebody who had like a track
Books,
record
podcasts.
of actually like not only booking podcasts but like effectively making those connections, because like there's lots of people who reach out to me that they want to be on certain podcasts. I'm like, you totally missed the mark. You're not even the right person. You didn't even listen to the podcast and you called me the wrong name. And
I
then there's
have
other
that.
people where like they've established rapport with people, they have really strong connections and they're able to kind of make this happen. And so, yeah, that's just like that's popped into my mind because, like, oftentimes there's lots of my own goals that are just on the cusp of being completed. And then I'll just kind of hesitate because I'm like, I don't have enough time or I don't have enough energy. And then just realizing that just like bringing in a specialist, even if it's for like a very, very short fragment of time, can be an absolute game changer because all of a sudden it changes it from like, I'll do it when I have time and extends year after year after year.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's like, oh crap, I actually locked that in. It's done. That was easy. And it's just kind of that's the exciting thing about life, like changing things from like that'd be nice to like I did it. Um, but
I
with
think
that
you're
said,
perfectly describing why people should also hire coaches.
exactly, exactly. Like I was actually on a call with another coach just before this, and he was skeptical as to whether what he did for people was the best thing for them. And I was like, well, truth be told, like, are you going to let them down? Are you going to just ghost them when they start with your program? And he's like, no. And I was like, are you going to not give them workouts? Just kind of leave them in the dark and make them guess? And he's like, no. I'm like, are you going to have a system to progress them over time? He's like, yeah. I'm like, are you going to make sure that they don't fall off track with their nutrition? She's like, yep. I'm like, then you're perfect. And because
There
like
you
so
go.
many people, they think to themselves like there's somebody else can do this, or maybe it's this person is so talented, like why would they work with me?
Hmm.
Um, but then the truth is like accountability and like a second opinion, kind of similar to like the process we go through when we're journaling or when I'm talking to ChatGPT by myself.
I
Those
love that.
processes, it helps us to close the gap between where we are and where we want to be. But I feel like I've just yapped at you for like 10 minutes. So
No,
now
that's
I
great.
want to put you in control of the conversation. What is one topic that is career or life related that you are just extremely passionate about, that you want to talk about more, that you want to kind of enlighten people on, or dispel myths on, or vent about, whatever you got?
Oh my gosh, I have to choose just one. could
Yeah.
go I could go on about a lot of things. Obviously, my niche for what I do for coaching and for women's health would be something I could go on and on about, and just put me on stage and we can talk about all the things that like are misinformation, what you really need to be doing, stress resilience. It's mostly like stress management for women, and it's crazy. But the lifestyle overhaul, I could talk about that for days. I mean, I could even talk about macros for days. Put me on somewhere for macros. Kind of boring, but I could do it. I could also talk about dating in 2024 forever. And then, I mean, those would be my top two, top three. I don't know. I could talk about those all day, and then could also get into like really big conversations about astrology.
Well, I'll help you out.
Everyone's like,
So,
credibility is now gone.
nah. So I like to kind of have fun with my podcast, and I've got so many character building moments from the last decade around the topic of dating,
Mm.
particularly in 2024. So I'll first share some of my own unique situations without like revealing this to anybody who might listen. I have to think about this carefully. Here we go. So this is a scenario that happened in real life last week. I
Last week.
actually Last week. This is fresh. I'm still
Okay.
like still feeling the lessons. Um, I decided that I was going to do something different than I had done before. This process started when I was like, okay, I'm going to delete all the apps. The apps aren't working for me. People are ghosting me. I'm not getting connection. This is just, it makes me feel like crap. And so
Mm.
at first, I was comically going for walks within a 10-kilometer radius of my house, looking for single women in my area. I was like, I'm just going to do this the old fashioned way. I'm just going to walk around and smile at everybody, smile
Hot
at
girl
men,
walks.
women.
Let's
Yeah.
go.
So that was kind of what it started off with. And I was like, damn it, it's not working. Now what do I do? And so then I signed up for this like dating event. And so my experience with this was extremely unique. I went into it with realistic expectations of that, like, there can be all kinds of different people at this event. And the best thing that I could do is go in with a positive attitude, be kind to people, ask them questions about them, show an interest. And that's what I did. And so this is how it kind of played out. I arrived, and to my surprise, like the organizer was one of my good friends. And so he walks up and he just kind of like gives me a wink. I'm like, oh shit, I know the organizer. I can't blow our
Yeah.
cover. They're gonna think I'm a plant, like that I'm planted in this to like, I don't know, match with everybody or something. And then everybody was like super reluctant to talk to each other.
Oh.
And then it was like I would have these conversations, and there was one question that I asked, and it got mixed reviews because I was like, and I understand why it got mixed reviews. So I understand sometimes I ask people type questions, but I was like, how did your last relationship end? Because I wanted to get like a better idea of like where they were coming from. And
Yeah.
some people would be like, oh, well, like, I mean, we amicably grew apart. we found that we had different goals for the future and we didn't want to see each other anymore. And then there's other people that were, oh, isn't that personal? And then there was another person that responded and she was like, all men cheat. I'm like, well, I mean, not all men. And then there was another person that responded to that question where they were like, well, like, I mean, truth be told, I was really expecting there to be more women at this event because I like this person was interested in women. This they were LGBT.
Mhm.
And that just it gave me so much exposure to how so many people aren't quite grounded in what they're looking for, and sometimes how they interact with us is more of a reflection on them than it is on us. Like if
Oh,
somebody asks me
100%.
like how did my last relationship end, I'll tell them about every last relationship, and I can always have like something positive to share from it.
Mhm.
And despite how I didn't get any meaningful connection from this event because people were either closed off or looking for different things, or some of them were bamboozled about the context of the event. I was like, we're here to talk to each other. And they'd be like, no, I'm going to sit in the corner. I'm like, all right, I will bowl and eat some pizza.
There you
But
go.
with that said, what have been some of your experiences where maybe you've learned something about yourself or learned something about how other people are coping with life in this period of time?
Yeah, I will say, I think one of the things that's been super helpful for me that I've learned over my dating history is like leaning into more of my intuition. And I know sometimes we can like logically throw that off or we think it's like anxiety. But like the last guy I was trying to seriously date, he had kind of gotten out of a divorce recently, but a year they've been separated. And I was like, he's not ready. Like I knew it. I knew he wasn't ready. And he was like, no, I am. I'm ready, blah, blah, blah. And then like 6 weeks later, he was like, no, I'm not. And I go, I knew it. Like I knew it. I knew it. You know, so it's just like if I just listen to my gut feeling and the energy that was coming off from it, like, do I believe like he was in a bad like trying to be malicious and trying to like win over some things for it? No, I genuinely think he tried to be ready and just wasn't. Um, so I think people definitely are going through their own things, and I think people do want love and security and companionship, but they may not be emotionally able to receive those things or give those things. So kind of trying to listen to that energy when I feel it. And then, I mean, my last real relationship, I learned to very much increase my standards because I kind of lowered them for this individual. And then we ended up breaking up because I was writing out restraining order paperwork for his ex-girlfriend. And at that point, I'm literally pen to paper, like, what am I doing? And I was like, this needs to go.
That's wild.
And it went. Yeah, his ex was like having a fun time stalking me everywhere. So when
Holy
you,
crap.
yeah, it was crazy. It was like, Chris, told you I could talk about it all day.
So what have been some shifts, some things that you've done differently? Like this was the first time I've ever gone to a bowling and dating event, and I was like, ah, this is different. I will try
Bowling
this.
and dating. I like it. I mean, I'm no stranger to doing risky things for dating. I flew to Iceland for to date someone. Yeah, hence these little fun tattoos I have right here. So I'm very much like we'll give it a shot. I'm not prone to sticking to my town. Like I'm an adventurer, so it sounded fun, so we went there. But some of the shifts that I've had to make, and maybe some of your female listeners can resonate with this, especially if you're a business owner, is it's not so much like going to dating things and putting myself out there. It was more of the internal shift of like, I am so masculine in my day to day, making decisions, running a business, like being the boss babe, whatever. But I don't want to be masculine in my relationship, but I was showing up masculine in my
Mhm.
relationship. So I've had to learn how to transition into more of a feminine receiving role and not like, I want this, so I'm going to go get it. More like they need to show me if they want it and they're going to get it, right? Like letting the man lead, like trying to find more of that. And so it was more of like a learning of how I was showing up, not where I needed to put myself from or what I needed to do on apps. It was more of like, you need to chill and sit back and see their actions, not like be the go-getter that you are, because you keep ending up with men who want you to do everything, and I don't want to do everything. So that's the big shift. I don't know if you've ever come across like women like that or yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
very
that
common in my friend dating circle with successful women, very common.
it makes sense, and that is something that I have learned through many character building moments where it's like I've learned to have better conversations on like a micro level as to like what is the other person's expectations and like
Okay.
what does the other person actually enjoy, how do they like to fill their time, what resonates with them, how do they like being communicated with. Like
Mhm.
I've learned so much about people's like love languages where it became like abundantly clear that if you don't come up with like kind things to say to people, they can feel very empty. And like, even if you're spending all your time with them, if you don't talk about the things that you appreciate about them or don't reassure them on the things, they can feel like just empty and hollow and cold.
Yeah.
And so I've definitely learned lots of things with that. And it's wild. So the final thing that I want to talk about is every time you put out that anonymous question box, you get the most like wildest responses, and it's quite entertaining. So I just want to know, what are your thoughts about that? And has there ever been anything that you were like, this is just ridiculous. This can't be legitimate?
You don't even see the ones that I don't post. Let's put it that way, okay? I'm not encouraging people to go blow up and troll my anonymous box. I'm not. But I wish you were following me when I was dating my ex like 2.5 years ago because his ex would be in it all the time. And it would be such crazy stuff just to try and get a rise out of me or like insult me, whatever. I often get a lot of sexual things in the box. Not great. Don't, that's not what I'm here for. To like tell you about these things either. I don't even know. The audacity is high, but I've gotten a lot of crazy question box. I don't even want to say it on the podcast. I'm like, I don't want to tell you what I've been what has
Yeah,
been.
I can read between the lines. I'm like, oh, I can just imagine. Like some people are just like nuts.
I think they do it so like I think they do it to see if I'm going to post it.
Do you ever get like really wholesome ones?
Yeah. I get really nice ones and I get sweet ones and I think I post those. Or at least most of them. I try and keep my like because I don't want to make my stories too long. So
Yeah,
I generally just try and answer the questions. But I do get really nice ones. I do get really great questions. And I won't ever stop doing the anonymous box because some people aren't comfortable sharing their health things to the
yeah.
public or to me. So I still want to be able to offer like a safe space to ask some questions. But yeah, they're very entertaining. And if you're looking for some entertainment, the weekends are when I do this Q&A box.
It's crazy how the powers that that Q&A box has, because I actually like way back, and this ties quite well with the topic, um about almost exactly 2 years ago. I actually opened up the floor to everybody on my Instagram to give me some like dating advice. What could I do
Ooh,
differently? What could I try differently? And it got shared 20 times to people who don't follow me, and
wow.
I got lit up. I One person said that I was needy, insecure, and reeked of well, it was needy, insecure, and something else. Reeked of insecurity. And I was like, holy shit. Like, how much do you hate me?
Once again, put it back that whatever they're saying is a projection about themselves, not you. So
Well, the nice thing was it kind of like it just brought out this inner anger. I was like, that is like the complete opposite. I have like receipts. I am very independent. And so that actually like
tell them.
something that I don't share with a lot of people. That's the reason why I went into jujitsu and will never quit jujitsu. Even if I take like 2 months off, I'll go back because I was
Anger
like,
management.
that is the opposite of who I am. But because of that experience, like every so often when I see people's anonymous question box, and this is like, I do this to dozens of people. I will think about something that's very genuine about them that I actually appreciate, and I'll just drop that in there. I'm like, I'm gonna just sprinkle some sunshine in all your
That's-
anonymous question boxes. But
So it
it's,
was you in my anonymous question box.
I think I could probably take credit for one of them. And
Aw.
it's usually like, and I do this to so many people in the industry, and I'm kind of like a sneaky Batman in a way, because they would never guess that it was me. But I'm just lurking around, just like if it's a dude friend, I'll be like, I really admire the way that you lead by example for your kids.
Aw.
Or sometimes it's a client, and I'm like, I really admire your ambition to stick to things. Or sometimes when I can see somebody struggling through some things and I can like see all the positive traits that they have, I'm like, just so you know, you have this, this, and this. These are all things that really stand out, and you're just awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the power of giving people compliments is so cool. And what I like about the anonymous thing is they can almost like transpose it to being who they'd want to hear it from. Because maybe, you know how two different people can tell you the same thing, but if one person tells you, you take it super seriously.
Yeah.
And if another person tells you, it's like, they're just saying that.
Yeah. You like bounce it off. Yeah.
Yeah. So by using the anonymous lens in some instances, because I also just say it right to people's face sometimes too, but by using the anonymous lens, it allows me to increase the odds of them taking that seriously because it comes from a very, like, if I don't have something nice to say about somebody, I'm not going to mess with their anonymous box. But it increases the likelihood that they actually hear it, where it like lands, it sinks in, and they're like, oh shit, like this is real.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah. And I just, as I reflect, there's all these memes where it's like every time like a guy gets a compliment, they remember about it for like the next decade. Like I can
Oh,
remember people who complimented a green shirt that I wore, or they said my shoulders were looking huge. I remember like almost the exact day. I definitely remember the year, and I remember the person who said it. And so then knowing that, I tried to put a bit more of that out to other people because I'm like, well, it's got to come from somebody, and it's like it takes an army to like kind of get people back up on their feet. So that's just kind of like my sneaky behind the scenes stuff that I do.
I love that. You're doing such great things for everybody. Everybody loves words of affirmation.
Well, and it helps, and especially because like sometimes we can't get enough affirmation. Like sometimes people are
No,
just
I
like really
know.
struggling through life and they just need to hear nice things a few times in a row. But with
Hmm.
that said, to keep us on track with time, I have a final
Oh.
question for you. And it would be, what is your piece of advice for people that they can implement this week that would help them with not just their fitness and nutrition, but just their life in general, with just being happier or more fulfilled, etc.
Okay, give me a second because I feel like my answer changes for this all the time. Because it could be something as simple as like with your health, like literally just eat more protein because people don't. But I really think right now, where we are in society with like election year, hurricanes, like craziness just happening, and everybody is grinding and there's no free time. And I think everybody is just feeling, or at least what I'm picking up from of social media and client consults and everything, is just extreme burnout. Like everybody is just disassociating, numbing, and burning out. So I will say the best thing that you can do, or one of the best things, is take, even if it's just 3 to 5 minutes in the morning, take some time alone to do some like focused breath work, even if it's just counting your breaths. You're not doing any kind of breath work pattern, but take some time to like drop into yourself so that you're at least starting from a place of parasympathetic activity and like rest. And then you kind of get centered for the day to move forward. If you can do this in sunshine or in front of a window, even better. Like I think getting sunshine first thing in the morning is the best thing you can do for resetting your circadian rhythm. But I think people are lacking space. When we do have free time, we're doom scrolling, we're watching Netflix, we're like trying to just distract ourselves from like being in the moment and feeling. And I think that's what most people need, is to just create space and like come back to ground zero and just touch grass. Like I need to personally touch grass right now, like I have to remember
Mhm.
to keep doing those things for myself because it can seem all doom and gloom and overwhelming, but like when we create a little bit of distance between that, we can see it more clearly. And I think that's what we're missing a lot of the time
I
is that
like
extra
that.
space. Yeah.
And that's very timely because I've been embracing very long walks, which is kind of
Hmm.
my version of separating myself from doing things just to do things, and more so having time to kind of reflect and just enjoy nature, be outside, just slow down. So hopefully people take the initiative to take that challenge seriously. But with that, that concludes our episode today. I would like to thank you, Ashley, so much for coming on the show and having this conversation.
Yay, of course. Thank you for having me. It was so fun. I can't believe an hour went by already.
Totally.